The pizza tasted like betrayal. Isabella Rossi, CEO of the Rossi Restaurant Group, sat in her 50th floor Manhattan office, staring at the lukewarm slice in her hand. It had come from Nonna's, her grandmother's original pizzeria in Brooklyn, the flagship, the beating heart of her entire $400 million empire. And it was, without question, the worst thing she had ever eaten. The sauce. It wasn't her grandmother's secret recipe. It was thin, acidic, and it tasted exactly like cheap, sugary ketchup. Welcome to Humble Stories. Where are you watching from today? This undercover boss is about to discover a crime hiding in plain sight, a story of betrayal and blackmail that will break your heart. So make sure you watch until the very end. Isabella looked at the quarterly reports again. The numbers told the same story as the pizza. Customer complaints at the flagship Brooklyn location were up 300%. Food costs, inexplicably, were also up by 50%. Yet profits were plummeting. The report screamed failure. But Isabella's instinct, honed from a lifetime in the kitchen, told her this wasn't failure. This was sabotage. Nonna's legacy was built on one thing: Nonna's secret, the legendary pomodoro sauce. Its recipe was a sacred text, locked in a vault, known only to Isabella and the legacy Pizziolo, pizza maker, at each flagship. The ingredients were non-negotiable. Imported San Marzano tomatoes, first-press Sicilian olive oil, garlic from Gilroy, fresh basil. To taste this ketchup was not just bad business. It was a declaration of war. She buzzed her assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the next 2 weeks and get me a uniform. A delivery driver's uniform." 3 days later, Isabella Rossi, CEO, vanished. In her place was Nina, a woman with her dark, expensive hair pulled back under a stained baseball cap. Her designer suit replaced with baggy black pants and a faded Nonna's Pizza polo shirt. She'd faked a transfer from a Chicago location, a new, desperate-for-work delivery driver assigned to the struggling Brooklyn store. She needed to see the truth for herself. She pushed open the back door of the kitchen at 4 p.m., the start of the dinner rush. The smell hit her first. It was wrong. The familiar, beautiful aroma of garlic, oregano, and slow-simmered tomatoes was missing. It was replaced by the acrid, metallic smell of burnt cheese and hot sugar. "You're the new driver?" "Nina," a man barked. He was in his 40s, a sweaty polo shirt stretched over a gut, a Bluetooth headset blinking in his ear. His name tag read, "Gius, Manager." He didn't look up from his phone. "Good. Don't be slow. Don't steal food. And stay out of the way. Got it?" "Got it," Isabella mumbled, keeping her head down. She scanned the chaotic kitchen, and she saw him. In the corner, away from the frantic, sloppy line cooks, was a young man, maybe 20, meticulously prepping fresh basil, separating the leaves with a care that seemed out of place. His face was tight with a familiar, bone-deep exhaustion. His name tag read, Marco. "Marco!" Gus yelled, finally looking up from his phone. "Stop playing with leaves and get the main line prepped. You're behind." Marco flinched, a small, pained movement. "Yes, Chef Gus. But the sauce, the main line vat is running low. I was going to ask my mother to—" "Don't!" Gus snapped, his eyes flashing with a sudden, strange panic. "I mean, don't bother your mother. She's retired. Just use the backup. You know the drill. Mix it. Now." Marco's shoulders slumped. He looked for a second like he was going to be sick. "Yes, Chef Gus." Isabella watched, pretending to check her delivery bag zippers. She watched as Marco walked to the dry storage, but he didn't grab a new vat of the cryo-sealed Nona's Secret from the walk-in freezer. He grabbed a gallon-sized, generic brand can of ketchup and a plastic tub of tomato paste. Isabella felt her blood run cold. She watched, horrified, as Marco, the one person who looked like he cared, dumped the cheap sugary slop into a large steel bowl. He added some water, some garlic powder, and whisked it, his face a mask of pure, agonizing shame. This was the sauce. This was the betrayal. "Order up, Nina! Delivery!" Gus shouted. Isabella was jolted from her trance. A pizza box was shoved into her hands. 1247 Maple. Don't be slow." Isabella drove through Brooklyn, her mind racing. The customer, an old woman named Mrs. DeLuca, who looked like she'd been eating Nonna's pizza for 50 years, opened the box. She didn't even taste it. She just smelled it. Her face, which had been smiling, fell. "It's just not the same," the old woman said sadly. Not to Isabella, but to herself. "I've been eating this pizza since I was a girl. Nonna would be ashamed." Isabella returned to the restaurant. Her heart a cold, hard stone in her chest. She found Marco in the alley by the dumpsters, scrubbing a pot with a vengeance. "Hey," Isabella said quietly. "That customer. She said the pizza tasted different. She said Nonna would be ashamed." Marco stiffened, his back to her. He didn't turn around. The customer is always right. "That sauce you were mixing," Isabella pressed. "The ketchup, that's not Nonna's Secret." Marco slammed the pot into the stack, the sound echoing in the alley. He spun around, his eyes red. "Look, Nina," he hissed, his voice trembling with a desperate, suppressed anger. "You're new. You're a driver. Just do your job. Drive the car, take the tips, and stay out of Gus's way. It's better for everyone." He stormed back inside, leaving Isabella alone, with the smell of garbage and the sharp, undeniable taste of a lie. She knew something was being stolen, but it wasn't just food. It was her grandmother's soul. And this young man, the only one who looked like he cared, was at the center of the crime. She had to know why. Marco's angry outburst in the alley didn't scare Isabella off. It did the opposite. It confirmed her suspicions. It wasn't the anger of a guilty man. It was the raw, panicked desperation of a trapped one. The kid was terrified. And in Isabella's world, fear was a tool used by men like Gus. For the next 3 days, Isabella became the perfect, invisible delivery driver. She was Nina, the woman who just did her job. She was fast on her routes, quiet in the kitchen, and kept her head down. She was a ghost in a polo shirt, which made her the most dangerous person in the restaurant. She listened, and what she heard was the sound of her grandmother's legacy dying, one delivery at a time. "This is our last order, Nina," a father of 3 told her at his doorstep, his kids refusing the pizza. "Please tell the manager we're done." "I found you guys on a worst pizza in Brooklyn list," a college kid said, laughing. "What happened? You used to be the best." With every delivery, the knot in her stomach tightened. But in the kitchen, she saw the problem wasn't just the sauce. It was Gus. He was a petty tyrant, a man who ruled by fear. "Marco!" he'd yell, storming through the kitchen. "You used whole milk mozzarella on that? Are you insane? Use the pre-shredded blend. It's half the price. I don't pay you to think, I pay you to scoop. Nina, he'd bark at her. You were 30 seconds late on that last delivery. That's a corporate flag. It's coming out of your tip share. He was a man creating chaos to cover a crime. But his special venom was reserved for Marco. He treated the young cook like his personal whipping boy, berating him, mocking him, and piling extra work on him. And Marco just took it. He absorbed the abuse with a silent, simmering shame. But then, Isabella saw the contradiction. It was late, near closing. She'd returned from her last run and was in the alley, folding boxes for recycling. Gus had already left. The kitchen was empty, except for Marco, who was supposed to be cleaning the grease traps. Isabella watched from the shadows. Marco looked left and right, then slipped out the back door. He didn't leave. He walked to a dark, forgotten corner of the alley, behind the rattling air conditioning units. There, hidden from the world, was a single, large terracotta pot. In it grew a lush, beautiful, fragrant basil plant. Isabella recognized the strain instantly. It was Nona's basil, the specific Sicilian hybrid her grandmother had cultivated in her own garden, the one the recipe demanded. It was the basil Gus had replaced with cheap, dried oregano flakes. Marco knelt by the pot. He pulled out a small watering can. He trimmed a few leaves, his movements gentle, almost reverent. He was tending to it. This young man, who was forced to mix ketchup slop all day, was secretly protecting the real legacy in the dark. This wasn't a criminal. This was a guardian. But the question remained. Why? Why would a guardian of the flame also be the one poisoning the well? It didn't add up. The next day, Isabella knew she had to find the why. The answer wasn't on the delivery routes. It was in Gus's office. She waited until the peak of the lunch rush. The kitchen was a war zone. Gus was screaming. Tickets were flying. Isabella grabbed a tray loaded with Cokes, and as she passed Gus, she tripped, sending a dozen sodas and ice crashing across the office doorway. "Idiot!" Gus roared, his face purple. "You useless! Clean it up, now!" I'm sorry, Isabella stammered. "I'll get a mop. My shirt, it's soaked. I just need to grab some napkins from your office." "Just go!" he screamed, turning back to the kitchen chaos. It was the opening she needed. She slipped into his office, a pigsty of old invoices and greasy menus, and grabbed a roll of paper towels. But she wasn't looking at the towels. She was looking at his desk. And there it was, tucked under a pile of pizza magazines, a simple black spiral notebook, the real ledger. Her hands shook. She opened it. Her blood ran cold. It was a meticulous, handwritten log, 2 columns, official order and spoilage. Week after week, Gus was ordering the full amount of premium ingredients, the San Marzano tomatoes, the imported olive oil, the blocks of mozzarella. And week after week, he was marking down 50% of it as spoilage waste. This was the blueprint of the crime. He wasn't saving money by using ketchup. He was doubling down. He was ordering the real ingredients, stealing half of them, and then forcing Marco to stretch the remaining half with cheap filler. The inventory was a lie. The 50% cost increase, the 300% complaint increase. It all made sense. She was about to take a picture with her phone when she looked up. Through the small office window that overlooked the kitchen prep area, she saw Marco. He was at the prep station. He looked left, then right, checking for Gus. He walked quickly to the dry storage, then to the walk-in freezer. He emerged a moment later with his backpack. Isabella watched, her heart pounding, as Marco looked around one more time, and then slipped a full, unopened can of San Marzano tomatoes into his bag. He followed it with a vacuum-sealed block of the premium mozzarella and a large handful of the real basil. He zipped up the bag, his face a mask of guilt, and returned to the line. Isabella's stomach dropped. The contradiction was solved. He wasn't a guardian. He was an accomplice. The kid she had just started to believe in, the one protecting the basil plant, was in on the scam. He was getting his cut. The basil plant, the sad eyes, it was all an act. He was just another thief. Isabella felt the cold, familiar sting of betrayal. She had her answer, but it wasn't the one she wanted. She had to know where he was taking those ingredients. She had to see how deep this conspiracy went. She was no longer just investigating a crime. She was confronting a traitor. She clocked out at 11 p.m., her mind a cold, hard stone. She didn't go to her car. She walked across the street, stepped into the shadows of a closed pawn shop, and waited. At 11:45 p.m., Marco left the restaurant. He didn't head for the subway. He started walking, his backpack heavy, into the dark, industrial part of Brooklyn. Isabella followed. The betrayal was a cold, hard stone in Isabella's stomach. She followed Marco from a distance, a ghost in the shadows of the Brooklyn night. Her assumption that he was just a petty thief and accomplice to Gus made her angry. But his profile didn't fit. Why would a thief tend to a hidden basil plant with such care? Why would he look so full of shame when he mixed the ketchup? Or so pained when Gus yelled at him that the pieces didn't fit? And Isabella hated puzzles she couldn't solve. He walked with his head down, the backpack clearly heavy, looking over his shoulder every block. He wasn't heading for a rival pizzeria. He wasn't meeting a shady contact in an alley. He turned into a desolate, industrial part of the neighborhood. The street was lined with dark warehouses and shuttered auto body shops. He stopped at a nondescript steel door under a flickering bare bulb. A sign so faded it was barely visible read, "Brooklyn Commercial Kitchens, 24HR rental." A ghost kitchen. Marco looked around one last time, fumbled for a key, and slipped inside. Isabella waited a full minute, her heart hammering. This was it. This was the handoff. He was meeting his buyer, or perhaps cooking the stolen ingredients in a neutral, untraceable location. She crept to the building's side, finding a grimy wire mesh window that looked into the kitchen space. She peeked inside, and what she saw stopped her cold. It wasn't a criminal transaction. It wasn't a Breaking Bad setup. It was a ritual. The kitchen was brightly lit, a stark white, sterile room. Marco had already unpacked his stolen ingredients. The can of San Marzanos, the block of premium mozzarella, the fresh basil which he held to his face, smelling it. His eyes closed in a moment of pure reverence. Then he began to cook. Isabella watched, stunned, as the clumsy, exhausted prep cook disappeared. In his place was a chef. His movements were fluid, economical, and filled with a practiced, loving care. He crushed the tomatoes by hand, the way Nonna had. He sliced the garlic paper thin. He added the olive oil and the smell. My God, the smell. Even through the thick glass, Isabella could almost taste it. It was the real sauce, the smell of her childhood, the smell of her grandmother's kitchen on a Sunday morning. And then she saw why. Huddled on a stool in the far corner, a small, frail-looking girl, no older than 9, was watching him, her thin legs tucked under a worn blanket. She had a sketchbook open, but her eyes were fixed on Marco. Marco, sensing her gaze, smiled. He took a spoon, dipped it in the simmering sauce, blew on it, and brought it to her. The girl, Rosa, tasted it. A slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. It was the first genuine happiness Isabella had seen since she'd started this investigation. Marco then grabbed a handful of fresh dough, also stolen, Isabella presumed, and began to stretch it. He made a small, personal-sized pizza, topped it with the real sauce, the real cheese, and the real basil, and slid it into the hot oven. He wasn't a thief. He was a guardian. This wasn't a crime. This was an act of defiance. This was his 3 a.m. sanctuary, the only place he could honor the legacy he was forced to destroy during the day. This was his Ethan moment, chopping vegetables in the dark. Isabella felt her anger evaporate, replaced by a profound, suffocating shame. She had been so wrong. She couldn't watch from the shadows any longer. She walked to the steel door and knocked, the sound echoing in the empty industrial street. Inside, the motion stopped. She heard a pan clatter. She knocked again. "Marco, it's Nina." The door creaked open. Marco stood there, his face pale with terror, a chef's knife in his hand. When he saw it was her, his expression changed from fear to a deep, agonizing confusion. "Nina? What are you?" Isabella stepped into the warm, fragrant kitchen. "You've been busy," she said quietly, her eyes landing on the little girl who was now hiding behind Marco's legs. "Please," Marco said instantly, his voice a panicked whisper. Don't tell Gus. Please. This isn't what it looks like." "Isn't it?" Isabella said, her voice gentle, all the hardness gone. "It looks like you're stealing premium ingredients from the restaurant." "I'm not," Marco cried, his voice cracking. I'm saving it. I pay for it. I swear. I don't punch out. I work 2 extra hours every night, off the clock, to cover the cost of what I take. Gus, he just thinks I'm a slow cleaner. I had to." "Why, Marco? Why this? Why risk your job for a pizza?" Marco looked down at the little girl hiding behind him. He put a protective hand on her head. "This is Rosa, my little sister." He walked over to the oven, pulled out the small, perfect pizza, and set it on the counter. She's sick, Nina. Really sick. Celiac, but it's worse. She's allergic to everything. Preservatives, sulfites, artificial flavors, red dyes, that slop Gus makes me mix. He choked on the word. That backup sauce, it's poison to her. It makes her bleed inside. We found out the hard way. He cut the pizza into small squares. Nonna's recipe, the real one, is the only thing she can eat. The real tomatoes, the pure oil, the fresh cheese. It's the only safe food in her entire world. I'm not stealing, Nina. I'm keeping my sister alive." The confession hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity. This was his paralyzed mother. Isabella felt her throat tighten. "But Marco, why? If you know the real recipe, why do you help Gus? Why do you make the ketchup sauce? Why are you a part of destroying the restaurant you clearly love?" Marco's face crumbled. This was the secret he couldn't bear. He slumped against the counter, the weight of the world on his 20-year-old shoulders. "I'm not his helper," Marco whispered, his voice breaking, tears of shame and rage finally spilling over. "I'm his leverage. He knows about Rosa." "He knows?" He found out. He found my stash of ingredients. I thought he was going to fire me, but he just smiled. He said it was noble. And then Marco looked at Isabella, his eyes dead. He said if I ever told anyone what he was really doing, or if I stopped mixing the fake sauce, he'd call Child Protective Services. He'd tell them my mother was an unfit guardian, that she was letting me poison my sister, that he had proof I was a thief. Your mother? Isabella said, confused. Maria, our bookkeeper, the one who just retired? Marco laughed, a bitter, broken sound. She didn't retire. Gus, he's blackmailing her too. He's blackmailing my mother. The words hung in the warm, fragrant air of the 3 a.m. ghost kitchen, heavier and more toxic than the steam rising from the pot of real sauce. Isabella stared at Marco, seeing him clearly for the first time. The exhaustion, the shame, the stolen ingredients. It all snapped into focus. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was a hostage situation. Tell me everything, Isabella said, her voice no longer that of a driver, but of a CEO. Quiet, cold, and absolute. And so, it all came out. The full, ugly truth. Marco's mother, Maria, had been Nonna's bookkeeper for 20 years. A woman Isabella had known her whole life. But last year, Marco's little sister, Rosa, had gotten sick. The celiac diagnosis, the severe allergies, the insurance, as it so often does, denied the claim for a specialist. Maria, in a moment of sheer maternal panic, had borrowed $2,000 from the cash deposits, intending to pay it back over the next few months. She never got the chance. Gus, with his petty, meticulous greed, had found the discrepancy within a week. He called her into the office, Marco whispered, his voice raw, feeding his sister a small bite of the real, safe pizza. He showed her the books. He told her she had two choices. He could call the police and she'd go to prison for felony embezzlement, or she could retire quietly, and he'd forget what he saw. In exchange, I had to stay on. I had to do what he said. Which was us. Isabella prodded. Mix the fake sauce, keep my mouth shut, and cook the real sauce. The 50% spoilage from the books. So he could sell it, Isabella finished for him. Marco nodded, his eyes glistening with shame. He forced my mother to teach him how to log the waste properly. He said if we ever told anyone, he'd send her to prison. He said, who would they believe? A disgraced old bookkeeper and her kid? Or me? He owns us, Nina. He knows about Rosa. He knows we can't fight back. Isabella felt a cold, calculated rage settle over her. This was the playbook of men like Gus. They didn't just break rules, they broke people. They found the one thing a person loved, and they put a knife to its throat. No, Isabella said, her voice flat. He doesn't own you. He just made you think he does. She looked at the pot of simmering sauce. He can't blackmail your mother if he's in a jail cell himself. Marco's head snapped up. What? This isn't just theft, Marco. It's felony industrial espionage. It's extortion. But to beat him, I need proof. You have to help me catch him in the act. How? He's smart. He's careful. He's arrogant, Isabella corrected. And arrogant men get sloppy. She needed the last piece of the puzzle. Who is he selling it to, Marco? And when? Marco hesitated. I don't know who, but it's always the same. Every Friday, around midnight, a white, unmarked van comes to the back alley. Gus handles it himself. He makes me cook the batch and pack it in plain, non-branded tubs. He calls it trash removal. Friday, Isabella said. That's tomorrow night. A plan was forming, cold and sharp. Go home, Marco. Get some sleep. Go to your shift tomorrow. Do exactly what he says. Mix the ketchup, pack the real sauce. Act like you're terrified. Act like this conversation never happened. Can you do that? He looked at his little sister, who was finally smiling, her stomach full of good food. He nodded. Yes, I can do that. Good, Isabella said, because tomorrow night, we're going to end this. For the next 36 hours, Isabella was a ghost in a polo shirt. She ran her deliveries, took Gus's insults, and watched. She was no longer just an undercover boss. She was a hunter, setting a trap. She needed the who. She couldn't just have Gus. She needed his partner in crime. She found her chance on Friday afternoon. Gus was in a rage, screaming at a line cook about the cost of pepperoni. He stormed into his office to run numbers. Isabella, watching him through the window, saw him open the black spiral notebook, the real ledger. Gus was called away by a sudden delivery driver crisis, which Isabella may or may not have helped create by accidentally grabbing the wrong address. He left the office, leaving the ledger open on his desk. Isabella slipped inside. Her heart hammered. She had 30 seconds. She scanned the page. It was all there. Spoilage, waste, blackmail. And then, at the bottom of the page, a new entry, scrawled in Gus's arrogant hand. Friday, 12 a.m. Inferno, Sal, 20 units, $5,000. Inferno, Sal Inferno Petrucci, her biggest rival in Brooklyn. The man who had been trying to buy Nona's recipe for a decade. The man Nona had personally thrown out of her kitchen, calling him a man with no soul, only shortcuts. Isabella took a picture of the ledger with her phone. This was the smoking gun. She spent the rest of her shift not delivering pizzas, but coordinating. She didn't call the police. This needed to be handled internally, cleanly, to protect Maria. She called her head of corporate security, a man who used to be in the Secret Service. Mr. Davos, she said, whispering into her phone from the alley. I need your best team. Plain clothes, Brooklyn flagship. 11:45 p.m. I want remote feed cameras covering the entire back alley, and I want you to be ready to intercept. A white refrigerated van, license plate Inferno 1. She hung up. The trap was set. That night, at about 11:50 p.m., the alley behind Nona's was dark, wet, and silent. A cold rain was falling. Isabella was hidden in a dark alcove across from the dumpster, her phone linked to the live feed from 2 micro cameras her team had installed. She could see everything. At 11:58 p.m., just as Marco had said, the white Inferno pizza van pulled into the alley, its engine idling. The side door slid open. Sal Petrucci stepped out, a thick white envelope in his hand. The back door of Nona's creaked open. Gus appeared, pushing aside a heavy dolly stacked with 20 large, unmarked, sealed tubs. The spoilage. Isabella hit record. Her phone screen captured the entire damning exchange. The tubs of stolen sauce. The 2 men. You're a lifesaver, Gus, Sal said, his voice carrying in the quiet alley. My customers, they think I'm the genius. They can't get enough of my new sauce. Just keep the cash flowing, Gus said, snatching the envelope and stuffing it into his jacket. That idiot CEO, Isabella, she just sits in her tower. She'll never know. She's too busy optimizing to see what's really... Gus, The voice was cold, quiet, and came from the shadows right behind him. Gus froze. He spun around. Isabella stepped out of the alcove, her baseball cap gone, her phone held up, its screen glowing with the live recording of the transaction. Gus's face, illuminated by the van's taillights, went through 3 stages in 2 seconds. Confusion, then annoyance, then pure, dawning, animal terror. "Nina?" he sputtered. "What? What the hell are you doing here? You're fired. Get out." "You're right about one thing, Gus," Isabella said, walking slowly into the light. "I'm done being a driver." She nodded. From the street, 2 dark SUVs, their lights off, suddenly blocked the alley. 4 men in black suits, Davos and his security team, stepped out, silent and professional. Sal Petrucci saw them and instantly dropped the tub, his hands in the air. I'm just making a delivery. It's a mistake." Gus was trapped. He looked at Sal, at the security team, and finally, at Isabella. He saw her eyes, no longer tired and defeated, but cold and powerful. He finally recognized her. Not from a memo, from the cover of Forbes. Isabella," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Ms. Rossi?" "Hello, Gus," Isabella said, her voice like ice. "It looks like you've been optimizing my profits. We need to talk about your numbers." My numbers?" Gus stammered, his face a mask of pale, sweaty terror. The entire alley was illuminated now, not just by the van's taillights, but by the 2 dark SUVs that had blocked both exits. Sal Petrucci was already being held against his van by 2 corporate security guards. "You heard me," Isabella said, her voice like ice, ignoring the man's collapse. She was no longer Nina, the tired driver. She was the CEO. "Let's review. You've been billing my company for 100% of our premium ingredients, while only using 50%. You've been forcing your employee to fill the rest with cheap, ketchup-based garbage, destroying our reputation, and you've been selling the stolen 50%, my 50%, to our biggest rival." She nodded at Sal. "A crime, by the way, he has already confessed to." "He's lying!" Gus shrieked, desperation making his voice high. It was waste, spoilage. Ask Marco. He cooked it." "Let's ask him." Isabella turned. Marco was standing in the kitchen doorway, framed by the light, his face pale but no longer afraid. "Marco, tell me, was it spoilage?" Marco looked at Gus, who was now trembling, a pathetic shadow of the tyrant who had terrorized him. He then looked at Isabella, the woman who had just saved his family. He took a deep breath. "No, Ms. Rossi," Marco said, his voice clear and steady. "It was theft. I cooked the real sauce because he blackmailed me. He threatened to send my mother to prison if I didn't." The confession, spoken in front of witnesses, was the final nail. You traitor!" Gus lunged, not at Isabella, but at Marco. He never made it. Isabella's security chief, Davos, stepped in front of Gus, blocking him with one arm, stopping him cold. "I wouldn't," Davos said, his voice bored. "Gus," Isabella said, picking up the cash-filled envelope Sal had dropped. "You didn't just steal from me. You used extortion against a desperate family. You didn't just damage my profits. You poisoned my grandmother's name. You're firing me?" Gus whispered, finally understanding. Isabella laughed, a short, cold, humorless sound. "Firing you? Firing is for bad employees. You're a criminal." She nodded to the two NYPD officers who had been waiting silently in the shadow of the second SUV. "Officers, he's all yours." As they cuffed Gus and read him his rights, he looked at Isabella with pure, unadulterated hatred. "This place will fail without me," he spat. "It's already bankrupt." "No, Gus," Isabella said, turning her back on him as they led him away. "It was failing because of you. Now, it's time for a correction." The alley was finally quiet. It was just Isabella, Marco, and her security team. Sal was being held in the other car, awaiting his own legal fate. Isabella walked into the kitchen, which was now filling with the other night shift workers, all drawn by the commotion. They stared at their delivery driver as if she were an alien. Isabella ignored them. She walked straight to the office, where Maria, Marco's mother, was huddled by the desk, having been summoned by security. She was weeping with relief. "Ms. Rossi," Maria sobbed. I don't know what to say. I'll pack my things. I'll take full responsibility." Isabella put a hand on her shoulder, echoing the kindness of Eastston. "You're not going anywhere, Maria," she said gently. "You made a mistake. A $2,000 mistake, trying to save your daughter. Gus made a multi-million-dollar mistake based on greed. They are not the same." She picked up the envelope of cash from Gus's desk. "This," she said, handing it to Maria, "is your severance from your old job. Your new job starts Monday. My entire Northeast restaurant division needs a new head auditor, someone I can trust, someone who knows exactly how a corrupt manager can cheat the books. I can't think of anyone more qualified." Maria's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But you were blackmailed because you're a good mother," Isabella said. "Now I'm hiring you because you're a great accountant. Go home. Be with your family. I'll see you Monday." Maria could only nod, tears of gratitude replacing tears of fear. She hugged her son, and for the first time in years, they both breathed. Finally, Isabella turned to Marco. He was just standing there, by the now cold pizza oven, his face unreadable. "And you," Isabella said, her voice all business again. "You lied to me. You mixed that poison, and you served it to my customers." Marco flinched, his shame returning. He nodded, bracing himself. "Yes, ma'am." "But," Isabella continued, walking over to him, "you also came here at 3 a.m. on your own time to keep the real recipe alive. You cried while you did it. You protected it." She stood in front of him. "Nonna's secret isn't just a list of ingredients, Marco. It's a passion. It's a soul. And you're the only person left in this building who has it." She held out her hand. "The position of head pizzaiolo and kitchen manager of the Brooklyn flagship is, as of this moment, vacant. The job pays 6 figures, plus benefits, including full medical coverage for your sister, Rosa." Marco stared at her hand, his mind short-circuiting. He looked at his mother, who was smiling through her tears. He looked at Isabella. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Don't say anything," Isabella said, a small smile finally touching her lips. She didn't hug him. Instead, she pointed to the vat of ketchup slop on the counter. "Just get that poison out of my kitchen, and never, ever let me taste ketchup on my pizza again." 6 months later, Nonna's was reborn. The sign was brand new, the kitchen was designed open concept, and on reopening day, The line snaked all the way around the block. At the center of the kitchen stood Chef Marco. He was no longer the exhausted, terrified kid, but a confident man in a black chef's coat embroidered in gold. His mother, Maria, now a corporate auditor, looked 10 years younger, smiling from a corner. Isabella, the CEO, greeted guests at the door. An old woman, a former customer, walked in, tasted a slice of pizza, and began to cry. "Nonna," she whispered. "It's really her." Isabella went to the kitchen, where Marco handed her a slice. The boss always tastes first. She took a bite. It was the perfect taste of her childhood. Her grandmother's legacy was restored. Marco smiled. "Nonna would be so proud of you." Isabella shook her head. "No, Marco. She would be proud of you." She realized she hadn't just saved a restaurant. She had proven that a true leader doesn't just sit in their tower. They must be willing to come down to fight for their legacy and their people. Isabella's story reminds us that a true leader doesn't just look at the numbers. They have to be willing to step down from their tower to protect their heritage and their people. Here at Humble Stories, we believe in bosses who fight for what's right. If this story moved you, please like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and good food is worth fighting for. Thank you so much for watching.